Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast.
Good morning, and it's maybe it's a happy Tuesday.
You can't steal his thing,
I
Tommy.
know. I just realized that this is our first not happy Tuesday.
Welcome to Tuesday, everyone. I guess we should just say that. Jumping in today, our main topic today is we're actually going to revisit a topic that we talked about. I think it was around, Tommy, I think you called it here about 10 episodes ago. We discussed the core visuals, Power BI core visuals, and just kind of talked through what they were, where we use them. Do we like to use them? Are they going to be part of the design process that we're going to build into when we build reports? And we had a very interesting call, or not call, but basically a message come back from Miguel Myers, the gentleman who's running the whole core visuals program. So I just want to make a very clear call out. We not misstated, but we didn't know. We just said what we thought was happening in the core visual space. And we got feedback directly from Microsoft on the direction of core visuals. So we're going to be happy to share some more core direction and core vision from the core visuals team. And we're going to unpack that and discuss that as well and see if that changes some of our minds around how we interact and what we use in and out of the core visuals portion. All right. That being said, let's go through some news here. Tommy, you found a couple news articles today we should discuss.
Yeah. So there's two ones that one isn't just the Fabric blog. So I don't know about you. I'm a big VS Code cursor guy. And just because of the extensions and what you can do with it, Copilot. And Gerald Buckle, I believe how to say the name. He's been the owner.
Gerhard? I think it's how you would say Gerhard.
Gerhard.
Brecki? We'll go with it.
Well, either way, he's really popular because he actually has this extension. So in VS Code, you can basically install extensions, and it's called Fabric Studio. It's officially V1. And simply what it allows you to do is go through your workspace, see all of your items, and you can even do API actions on them.
Mm-hmm.
You even edit directly items from VS Code in your file system provider. You can look at deployment pipelines, even look at Git integration as well, which is crazy.
Yeah, and this is almost feeling like like a file browser or command line for your Fabric environment. Gerhard has also done an amazing job on another tool that I actually like and I have installed in my VS Code as well. There's a Power BI version of this, a Power BI Studio, which is a very similar experience. What Gerhard has done, though, is he's not only made an extension for VS Code, but you sign in with your Microsoft account into VS Code, whatever that may be, your Microsoft tenant. And what that gives you access to is Gerhard is able to then allow his code library to run a whole bunch of APIs against the Fabric and Power BI experience very easily. So that is very easy for us to kind of figure out, and now we can then run a bunch of APIs directly against the experience there. What other things, Tommy, here do you think is fun?
Yeah, so you can edit in the VS Code semantic models using Tyndall, reports using PBIR, notebooks in Python, Spark jobs and definitions. You can easily copy a semantic model from one workspace to another, or upload our local PBI project to Fabric without always having to publish it. The Fabric Git integration, you can actually now manage it as it was a local repository. So another just awesome thing. And then there's this really cool thing called Fabric API notebooks. He actually created this kind of notebook language where it makes it really easy if you're not familiar with Semantic Link Labs or don't know where to get started. He has all the APIs that are available for Fabric and basically created this notebook to say, hey, I want to get everything in my workspace and I want to see what it is. So it's also a great way, an awesome way to get started with the APIs as well.
Yeah, I really like this tool. The experience of having multiple folders, one for each workspace, and then being able to see the Lakehouse, the paginated reports, the Power BI reports, all these things that are, oh, dude, I'm just telling you, like navigating around the Power BI ecosystem as an admin, this is the way to go, man. I mean, anytime you want to do admin level things or like high level modifications. Also, the other thing here to note as well is if you are using the new formats of the Timdal editor as well, there is also integrated all the Timdal formatting that is an open library, I believe, as well. And so all of the Timdal formats are already incorporated inside the tool. So imagine multiple workspaces, multiple semantic models where you're now publishing them using the PBIR format or the new PBIR format and using Timdal at the same time. You can now breeze through any semantic model anywhere in your entire Power BI environment, for that matter, and go look at the expressions, the database, the tables, the measures. You can go search for things across the entire expanse of your library. Like, this is huge. I mean, the ease of which this allows you to manipulate and get through the system is really, really impressive here. So anyways, I have shared the link. The link is in the chat window as well. It's also in the description of this video. If you haven't tried this out, if you are a Visual Studio Code user, I highly recommend you check this out. There's a whole bunch of really cool features here. And I'm sure you're going to need to follow Gerhard a little bit more. He's probably going to blog a lot more about this one. He's also a Microsoft MVP, so he's a fellow MVP. So I got to give him a big shout out there as well. Gerhard, thank you very much for the tool. This is awesome. We really love it. Keep up the good work on this one. Any other topics, Tommy, that you found?
Yeah. So Fabric has their, I guess we missed it. It was in December, but notebooks version history, which actually a live version history has launched. So we had it before to actually see if you made changes to the notebook, but it was not the easy experience to see what those changes were in the user interface.
Let's be honest here. This is a direct play from copying what Databricks is doing today. Or Databricks, you go in there, you can see every time someone edits a notebook, someone is seeing those live version changes as someone is editing the code. I can't tell you the number of times I've accidentally deleted a cell, and I was like, "Oh shoot, I didn't really want to delete that." But now this live versioning allows you to kind of go back and walk through and see what those changes are done. I've also had instances where something broke in production. Someone wasn't supposed to edit a production notebook, and for whatever reason, someone was changing something or production was running. Someone went in to go discover or look at something and turned something on or added some code they shouldn't have or deleted a cell or changed something, thinking that it was okay. And then all of a sudden, I get it every day, I start getting failures on notebooks running. So in the past, I've also done some debugging in the past of, hey, we moved some changes into these notebooks into production. What happened at that time? And how do we go backwards in time to figure out what who made the change? And then how do we fix it? So I've also found this to be very useful in the Databricks space. I haven't played with this feature as much as I would like to inside Fabric yet, but I know I really like this feature that I use from Databricks, and it seems very similar in nature. So I'm very excited to see this kind of level the playing field in the notebook space as well. Have you played this one with this feature at all, Tommy, yet?
Not with the live history yet, but it's definitely something that was going to bring it up today going, oh yeah, that would be great for a few things that I've been working on. So
yeah, I like the it's basically a new, there's a button you press and then the version history on the far right-hand side of the panel kind of pops out and you can see what cell was changed, what was made, and then there's a little name next to who was making changes or editing things at that time, which again, I think is really useful, especially when you're doing multiple people in the same workspace, in the same notebook, making changes to stuff.
1,000%.
Very helpful to kind of see those changes there. This is, let me be clear, this is a different experience than working with Git. So this is not a Git level experience. This is something that's separate. It's just tracking changes in the notebook as you're editing the notebook. Git requires a commit and a check-in to get those changes directly into the Git repo. So this is sometimes people are like, oh yeah, version history, I have Git that takes care of it. Well, it's kind of different. A little bit different there. Any other thoughts, Tommy, on this one?
Nope, I'm pretty good.
All right, we'll check that one out. This was made by, I think it's Jenny. Jenny was pushing this one out on a blog feature. This is also in the description below, and I will also drop a link to this post out as well. You can see that on the Microsoft Learn documentation as well. All right. With that, let's jump into our main topic today. Tommy, give us a quick summary of what we were talking about previously on core visuals, and then let's incorporate some of our lessons learned or learnings from Microsoft. Microsoft gave us some feedback on our prior podcast.
Yeah, so we visited the core visuals, and we really were talking about the core visuals LinkedIn page that they have, going through all the posts that they've been doing. And so we had some major questions. Where are we with the core visuals? They're really cool, but right now every core visual is in a sense a separate visual than the standard ones. There's a card visual,
Yep.
there's a slicer visual.
We kind of had some issue with this. We're like, okay, well, what happens to the old visual? Why is there a new one? How long will those live together? Are they always going to stay there together? That was one of our initial questions.
And so we basically wanted to ask, like, do we need to be an expert in these new core visuals? Because they are in preview. They're not necessarily out live. So it's like, okay, is this something that we want to be spending a ton of time on, even though there's a ton of new features? But the biggest question we've asked ourselves that we commonly do is, are you going to use it in production with your clients or with your production reports? Are you going to replace the standard visuals? Am I always going to use the new card core visual rather than the standard card visual and try to migrate everything over or create when I'm creating new? So those were kind of where we're stuck on. Where does this replace the standard visuals, and should I be doing that now? And what do we need to wait for in order for us to incorporate this in our workflow?
So let's talk about those two initial features here, right? So one of our initial concerns was there's two of them. It's in preview. So unprompted by Microsoft, like we didn't reach out for this help. Miguel reached out to us directly. So kudos, Miguel. Thanks for reaching out directly and helping us clear the air on like the vision of some of the things for core visuals. So to be honest, this actually alleviates a lot of my, not angst, but just kind of like, I had some gripes around what we were doing with core visuals. So the first comment here really is just kind of a general processing standpoint, right? So why are we having two card visuals? What's the deal with card one and the new card visual that we're actually using here? I believe the direction here is all those cards will be eventually the new card visuals will replace the old card visuals. Mm-hmm. And Microsoft is going to allow the new card visual to then kind of support things moving forward. But if you think about Microsoft development pattern, right? Going back to a previous, any kind of code, whatever you're building, anytime you're building code and you're building a new version of that code or you're learning things or you've built new stuff, if you try to always have backwards compatibility, the old visual or lines of code required a lot of support to retain all those old existing features because you can't break something. You can't just switch it one day and all of a sudden, all of these old visuals now are broken and no longer working. So it sounds to me like what's happening here is in order to shortcut some of that, or how do we move fast, right? How do we get you a new visual without incurring all the technical debt of retaining old code? So the solution was, and this is kind of where I think why we have two card visuals now, is the old visual is the traditional code. The new card visual allows them to build all things new, thinking, re-architecting the visual, how the data comes into the visual. And this is true because the new card visual can take multiple measures as opposed to the old card visual that can only handle one. So there's already something, if you think about like visual development, there's some core fundamental data changes that they've been doing to support multiple KPIs and then being able to divide those KPIs across multiple cards if needed on the new card, the multi-card.
And I think that's so that's the biggest thing to me, where when we saw the new core visuals coming out, like, it's great, it's cool, but you're creating a new one and you're putting all the features in this new visual. And just like, I think this was leading up right into our kill it or complete it with talking about preview features. Like, okay, I don't need more preview features in my life. Correct. Okay, well, Microsoft let us know that these are the release with the card visual. This is going to replace the current card, multi-card, and KPI card visuals. And simply put, to try to overwrite right now and just make those significant or marginal updates to the current visuals would be impossible.
Well, it just would take longer, right? So the idea is like, do you want something today or do you want something in like 6 months? Like,
Right.
what would you want to do? So I think the right choice here is, hey, here's a new visual. You can start using it right now. One, it adds value immediately with minimal effort, and then they can kind of backfill in the features of the old visual. So, Darren, you're asking a great question. So does Microsoft have Power BI code to support the old and the new visuals? This is also a response that Miguel gave back to us as well. And he also said, for the new card visual, let's just talk about just the card visual for a moment here. What's going to happen is the new card visual will be eventually released to GA. So it's very committed that the Microsoft team is behind getting these new visuals out into GA. Having a statement from the guy who owns the feature really adds a lot of confidence to me to say, I'm much more comfortable now saying, yeah, this is going to go GA. This is something that the Microsoft is standing behind. And the fact that they're continually building new card visuals and they're finishing those visuals is just very promising. So very excited to see that. Another note here is too, if you think about what the old card visual does and what the new visual can do, the new card visual pretty much can do everything the old one could. You had one measure before, now you can have multiple measures. The previous one was just a single pane or single card of information. The new visual can now support multiple cards of information and makes it more efficient for you to build a query to go back to the engine and return data. So if you have a old visual, Miguel says, we're looking at a feature that's going to allow you to do like an auto migrate. Hey, this card visual is old. Or I would, if I'm giving some advice here, right? Yeah. It'd be nice if you opened your report and it said, hey, we found all these old card visuals that you have. Would you like us to upgrade them for you throughout the entirety of the report? Something along those lines, right? And then what it would do is it would take the old properties of the old visual, remap it to the new visual, and then apply the, as best it could, new properties to the new visual. I understand this probably can't be like an easy one-to-one all the time, and you're going to get a little bit of like, weird behavior between the old visual and the new ones, but just the fact that Microsoft is even thinking about giving you like an upgrade feature to upgrade that element, super big win in my point.
And to me, with the one-click change, with also one of the things that Miguel also said is the new card visual is designed to suppress all the other visuals that we support. It's the foundation for all new core visuals.
Yes. So it's like this is going to be a rolling wave effect of like more visuals will continue to show up. They'll show up as new visuals, and eventually they're going to roll into what will now be the new card visual moving forward. It's going to be the card visual, and you'll migrate all your old card visuals up to the new one, which is good. I think that makes a lot of sense. One note here, Tommy, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about our news articles. This kind of happened without being planned here, but Gerhard's tool about looking at Tyndall and being able to look at the individual visuals. So Tyndall, and particularly the PBIR format, is really what gives you the ability to see individually what are the properties of a single visual. There's nothing to say that if you don't want to wait for Microsoft to migrate you to the new card visual when it goes GA, let's assume that we've already gone GA here. You could actually write a little simple Python script or some code, or you could pull down the PBIR format of your reports using VS Code. And you could go through and you could programmatically replace the old visual with the new visual and figure out how to map things together. So this could be a community-based tool that will be in there eventually. Gerhard, if you're bored on weekends and you have nothing else to do, you may want to consider a visual mapping experience. Maybe you could pick a visual and say replace with new visual, and then you just kind of map the properties to the new visual. And you could do all that with like a command prompt, or that now that we have the code that generates a visual, right? We can programmatically swap things out without having any major effort there. One thing I know that Alex Powers really gets bent on is the prolific use of pie charts across everything. So why not open a report in VS Visual Studio, run Fabric the fabric tool and rip out all the pie charts and replace them with a bar chart. Like there's no reason why we couldn't do this. This is a very possible thing.
Or Kurt Bueller has an article on how to actually edit your report file using Semantic Link Labs.
So again, the PBIR format is really rich. Semantic Link Labs, there's an API that Semantic Link Labs talks to, which gets the definition of the report and just returns it as text or code back to you. So you can do all these extra things. So this is where I think things get really, really interesting. We're at to me, right, from a programmatic standpoint, Microsoft's really hardening the layer of the report layer and making sure the report layer has what it needs, and they're documenting it. There's actually a spec involved with the report layer. And I think this is a very large turning point for Microsoft. This is really, really smart. I really like the fact that they're changing the direction here. They're actually giving us standards and things to go by that'll make it much easier for us to really work with the report format. Anyways, really cool features there as well.
So as we continue to move forward, and I don't know if we've talked about the vision board yet, but
we haven't. This is another good place to bring it. So I'm going to bring the link up here on this one, Tommy. Keep going about the vision board. This is another feature that was brought out by the Microsoft team.
My goodness. So the core visual team, Miguel, launched what's called a vision board. It's basically a public Power BI report on the web, and it's awesome because they designed it. And what it's actually showing is really all the ideas on the sections on what they're documenting and detail, every visual that they're working on, the ideas that they have, and what's aligned with documentation. This is important because as they continue to try to expand, and I don't want to say divert from the standard visuals, well, what about, okay, how do you use them? Because it is going to be a new experience. So Miguel and the team have done a really conscious effort towards what we're building, features we're releasing, what we're wanting to work on, aligning with documentation. But the navigation hub or this core visuals board is awesome because this vision board really shows you every visual, and it shows you, like, for the new card visual, what's completed, what ideas do people have. For example, I can look in here and see small multiples for cards, things that have just been completed. If there's a link to the documentation of Microsoft Learn, cards with trend lines, I want that. Spark Gen lines generally available, under development. That's okay. So, and everything else is pending. And then even something called actionable cards. But you can see all the different visuals they're working on. And this is pretty awesome. I don't know about you.
Yeah, one thing is for certain, Miguel is an expert of doing things that are incredible. And so his report building is second to none. It's absolutely phenomenal. One of the reasons why I think this is very impressive is Miguel is using a Power BI report, and this is the link. This is the link that we're talking about right now is actually in the chat window. So if you're on a computer, something like that, and you want to go look at this published to web version of the report, it's incredible. It is absolutely a phenomenal embedded report that they've been developing here, and it's so cool. And in this report, there's actually click to vote, and you have all the different features, and there's Cartesians, and so all the different visual types that you were looking for. Miguel has done an amazing job of linking what is the feature, is there a status to it, and then where's the learn documentation to learn more about this particular feature inside that visual. And there's a ton. Like, this thing is super deep. It goes through the feature list. It goes through the fabric ideas page. He's done an incredible job of, like, pulling all this great information together. And the vision board looks beautiful. It's absolutely a beautiful vision board. It's very easy to understand. The navigation's on the left. I mean, this is just an application at this point. I mean, it's so good. Anyways, go out there, go check out the vision board. If there are certain visuals that you wish you saw more about, like call out visuals or more of your table and matrices, what kind of things are you interested in seeing being built and developed? You can actually go look at this, and we want to hear from you. I mean, part of the idea here is Miguel wants you to go vote on these ideas. So there is a click to vote option on all these different features, and you can go click on these different ideas at Fabric, I think it's ideas.powerbi.com or Fabric Ideas. Go vote on the things that you want and let Microsoft know which features are you most interested in. And that'll help them design and build out the workflows for the right audience. Anyways, incredible.
By the way, they're also working on some more theme things. So, which is pretty cool. We can a better way to create themes. I know we have the best theme tool in the world at PBI Tips, but I think a lot of people just want to make some quick edits. And they're even adding more things you can actually do to controls. I think this is so important for where we're at from a report building. All the focus has been right now on Fabric and Fabric integration and Fabric development and, Power BI developers. But what has not gotten love is the designers at all, even close. The only thing the designers have gotten in the last few months or in terms of features.
You're talking about like report authors or report builder people or
exactly.
Creators of report content.
Exactly. The only thing that they've gotten is now that report designers can use Git, and which is not what they want. They've had some of the core visuals, but in terms of being able to design really that enhancements, this is great that there's all these things coming now for the designers. And also the roadmap too for I want to start using these new core visuals.
Well, I think this is, again, going through a couple more points that Miguel has pointed out here, right? Miguel's team is also, not only are they building these features and they're doing the feature builds themselves, they're also spending a lot more time about building documentation and sharing information and assets. And they're going to be doing so over the next couple months. So the team has a strong commitment. And this is what I think I really stand behind here. And this is what gives me really good confidence that Microsoft is investing in these new visuals to really modernize them. I mean, we've had these same standard visuals for 10 years now? That's when we kind of started. So 10 years of visuals, and now we're getting like a little bit of a refresh on some of these. This is the right time to do that. But Miguel is also committing here. The Microsoft team is assigning people and team members to update the documentation, provide more assets and examples. To be honest, Microsoft builds the tools. They don't necessarily do a great job of always showing you how to use their tools. They kind of rely a bit more on the community because if you think about this, Microsoft only has so many people and resources. They are big, but they're doing so many different things, right? They're building all the things in Fabric and all the things in reports. So they have to spend their time wisely on what they create. But having the community jump in and stand behind some of these new core visuals and actually provide examples, that's where I do a lot of learning. I mean, I'm always on Twitter or LinkedIn looking at things and watching what settings people have adjusted on other visuals to get ideas of, that's an interesting way of displaying that visual or that report. One thing that I wish desktop did a little bit more of was making this more easy for you to discover. And this is something that we're working on at Power BI Tips around our Power Designer. We're trying to think about what is the common styled things that you're going to build on a visual, and how do we capture that? Like, I've already spent all this time on stylizing a card visual. What if I want to reuse that style on other reports or make it part of my normal corporate template? Or maybe I just want to save that styled property as one of my favorites and come back to it later on. That way you don't have to do that same style over and over again on every single card or visuals in a report. So I think with the, if I had to put my thinking cap here on a bit, with what Gerhard's building in VS Code, with the new PBIR format, with the ability for us to use API calls and get the definition of report out, there's a lot more possibility here for us to build, or the community to build tooling that really aids with what Miguel's trying to produce here is, hey, by the way, we've made the tool. Here's a lot of good examples of other visuals or other styles of visuals you can easily incorporate, which would be really cool to do that as well.
So obviously, if you looked at the vision board, you would see, I don't know, probably over 60 different features they're working on right now, or ideas. Not all of them have been worked on, but a good amount of them are either, like pending, in progress, and a good amount are even completed too. If you were to try to go through this, and again, let's say you went through a coma, or you were in a coma for the last, I don't know, 3-4 months, and all of a sudden these core visual updates came out. Wouldn't you feel behind? So, and I'm trying to think about this as I've known this core visuals through and through the last
Yes.
9 years. And now all of a sudden there's probably, like I said, probably 50 to 60 features that are being actively worked on. Are you worried about the being users being overwhelmed?
No, you always ask that question. I'm never
No.
I'm never bothered by this question. It's the effect of, I mean, Power BI already has a certain level of knowledge you need to get competent just building a visual,
Sure.
right? I think it's very approachable from I just need to build a visual, stylize some very basic things. There is on visual editing now, which matches a lot more of what you would be doing in Excel, and it gets you to some of the visual properties very easily. But to your point, Tommy, like, you need a tool that can start simple, but then go deep, right? It can be a mile wide, but we can't have an inch deep of capability on the tool. We need the tool to be really wide and really deep. And I think what this is giving us is the ability to go really deep on designing a particular visual and give us, when you get to the expert level of all the features that you need to be building and stylizing, I get really excited about this. So I would argue here, I'm probably really changing my tune a little bit on these core visuals after hearing a lot more directly from Microsoft around this as well. One other thing I'll just point out here as well, in addition to the vision board that Miguel has published, I also want to be very clear, Miguel has also published a series of blog posts on LinkedIn from their LinkedIn profile. So there is a LinkedIn profile that is called, I think it's called Power BI Core Visuals. It's on LinkedIn. And Miguel has been blogging on the LinkedIn Core Visuals area, where you can see introducing the new text slicer. Here's enhancements to the small multiples. And what's happening here is these blog posts are detailed instructions on what is happening on these particular new features that they're releasing. So I just want to be very clear about this one. Where Miguel is putting a lot of the content has been on LinkedIn, which I think is actually very appropriate. Most users, I think, of the Power BI products would have some presence on LinkedIn anyways. And I think this is a very business-centric place to put those posts. So I also want to just directly link you to the page. If you're looking for more information around the visuals, how to use them, what features can you turn on to change the style of these new core visuals, you definitely need to read the Power BI Core Visuals on LinkedIn. That's where a lot of this information is coming from.
And again, one of the important things is learning, especially with something that's rapidly happening right now. I think right now the only channel they have also is just the LinkedIn channel right now. They don't have a Twitter or really any other kind of announcements.
I would argue, I mean, if you're really trying to figure out, like, let's be real about like the metrics of things. Like when we look at our channels and things like that, when you're talking about people who are using Power BI desktop or on a desktop computer, yes, you can get to Twitter. Yes, you could get to like Instagram, all those other things. But most of those apps are on your mobile device. You're not browsing. Our metrics show that most users on desktop are in YouTube. Well, not YouTube, actually. It's more like the LinkedIn space. The LinkedIn space is very much a desktop application. So I think Miguel is putting the tutorials in the right place, but it doesn't fit your normal Twitter feed of things as well. So just be aware it's there. I would highly recommend you go follow the PBI Core Visuals community. That's on LinkedIn. Highly recommend it. It's definitely worthwhile your time to follow that. They only have, here, does it say how many people follow them? 20,000 followers. So I think it's very underrated at this point. So let's bump that number up a bit and get some more interactions and pushing and publishing. The nice thing about LinkedIn as well is if you go in and you comment on the features you like on either the vision board posts that they have or the PBI Core Visuals posts, that actually helps Miguel push that information out wider to a larger audience. LinkedIn will then promote more of that content to other people if they all like and favorite and comment on those things. So make sure you definitely go in there, add comments, repost it, like the content that you see there as well.
All right. So as we kind of gone through, I think most of the major kind of features, are we missing anything in terms of just kind of from the revisiting the news, the updates here, if someone wanted to get started?
No, I think this covered many of my main earlier concerns when we talked about this topic to begin with. I think when we started here around core visuals, we were a bit hesitant just because maybe this wasn't articulated as well. The vision board wasn't as clear in our minds. So I think it's worthwhile, even though we weren't paying attention as much, to give a lot of credit due to the Microsoft team, and particularly the core visuals team, as they're really picking out some good stuff here. And I feel a lot more confident now moving into utilizing these core visuals as part of my daily workflows. So I think that's what I'm going to do. The takeaway kind of for me, Tommy, on this one is I'm going to use core visuals a lot more. What about you, Tommy? Are you going to jump in a bit more? And
especially that the transition, I think that was the biggest thing is I obviously want to test things out. There's a few people online that are doing a great job with these core visuals, but again, the biggest problem is this: am I going to send this to a client? And now, if I'm doing a handoff, does the client understand at all these new visuals, or the person's going to be doing that? Even from a trainer's point of view, we already deal with the basics. And one of the things with Dashboard and Day, with our standard beginner, intermediate, and advanced training on building Power BI reports, where does this come into it? I think the two big things I'm asking right now is, obviously this can always be a work in progress, but will we have a GA or complete, but we'll keep working on things in terms of most of the visuals, like for the card, the theme, all of these features? Or are some things going to be GA and some things going to be preview at the same time? Because that's going to dictate a lot from a training and also handoff point of view. And then the other part is honestly how easy that migration button is once they deliver that. So those I
would agree. And I think there's going to be, I mean, it's not going to happen all day tomorrow, right? So this is one of these things where, we're not going to be able to get landed all the visuals directly in out of preview into GA immediately. But I think if I had to put my thinking cap on here for a little bit, right? I would argue that the best way to communicate this to us is really looking at that vision board. I think the vision board will be the direction of where we want to watch these features get pushed out. And I think, like, let's take one for example. If you look at like the call out visuals and the cards, there's a feature list on the card visual, and then there's like a gauge, right? If you look at all the features list that has been produced that Microsoft is pushing out here, there's 3 features for the new card visual that are all completed. So there may be some work on the backlog to migrate you from the old card visual to the new card visual. So to me, I would argue that the new card visual that has been released for a while now, actually, is probably going to get closer to being coming complete here. And also, if you look down on the different Epic ideas of card visuals, they have things for like multiple rows for cards, cards with trend lines, right? There's features that are kind of currently under development, and Microsoft is already communicating to us that, hey, look, the small multiples for cards isn't complete yet, but we're already working on those features. And I hope what we do is we work through the various Epic ideas. And when you're talking about planning of projects, Epics are like really big bodies of work. It would be really nice to have all the Epic ideas completed. And then at that time, we would know, okay, we're very close to going GA. Let's migrate over to the new visuals. So I think, again, reading between the lines here a little bit, the vision board is going to be where we're going to want to look for when features are going to go GA based on their completion of the expected features.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go through the documentation. I didn't even realize, too, the LinkedIn page has a ton of tutorials. There's actually a lot more Microsoft Learn documentation pages on this than I realized.
But that's my point, though. Like, we're experts in this area, and maybe we saw them, but we didn't click into them. We didn't engage with them. We didn't promote them. Like, so I think this is our like, whoops, we missed this.
Yeah.
Whoopsies, right? I mean, this is also potentially one of the things too. Tommy, our workloads are shifting more towards Fabric, right? We're building things in Fabric as well. So this is one of the downsides of having a team that's building so many different things now. It's hard to focus people's attention on specific things now. So like, we're not focusing our attention on just card visuals anymore. We're focusing on pipelines and notebooks and Python notebooks and lake houses and all these other medallion architectures, or is it a data mesh architecture? There's so many more possibilities to do inside Fabric now. I think this has distracted us potentially away from a lot of other really great features. And I wanted to step back and say, whoa, time out. Core Visuals is really awesome. Miguel gives us great assertion that this is coming out in GA, eventually, and it'll be really, it'll be the path forward moving with all the core visuals. So just want to congratulate the team on the hard work there, and very much more excited to get involved and dive in deeper with a lot of the core visuals.
I look forward to seeing your presentation on all the new core visuals.
Well, this is where I come into this. I like learning things. This is maybe going to change the conversation here slightly, Tommy. I like teaching things because it helps me learn them. So it forces me when I start sitting back and saying, let's look at this new visual. Let's talk to people about what you can and cannot do with a particular visual. It really helps me. I know how to do the things, but when I step back and say, okay, let's start with someone who has no experience. Let's start with ground zero. What would we want to communicate or talk to them about this? What's the right process? That's where I feel like, for me personally, is where the real learning happens, is when you teach somebody else what you are trying to develop or build.
Interesting.
Do you feel like that's the same thing in your world as well?
Yeah, I would like you to actually kind of elaborate on that too, because I like where you're going with that.
Well, you could know how to do something, right? So I could go into Power BI Desktop and I could know how to make a visual, right? But solidify the idea in your mind of the sequence of steps, or really critically evaluate, well, maybe I shouldn't have made 6 visuals at once. Maybe I should have made one visual, stylized it, and then copied it multiple times, right? If you think about the process of you building things, and then I think teaching for me causes me to be introspective on what I'm doing inside the application. And so it really helps me step back and say, well, this doesn't make sense if I drop down a visual on the page, and then I immediately start going into like talking about all the very nuanced properties of, let's say it's a line chart, right? It doesn't make sense to drop a line chart on the page and then immediately start talking about all the analytical properties of a trend line and anomaly detection. Like, those are features of the line chart, but they're not useful until you understand the core concepts of, okay, where do we modify the titles? How do we adjust the X and Y axes? And we turn them on and off? What other style properties? So there's a progression where you have to think through, how do I bring someone along in the journey to bring them up to the knowledge level that we have, as we've studied and worked hard on knowing how to build things. Another example here that I think about is helping people think through adding bookmarks to reports. Like, you can do a lot with a bookmark. And back in the day, I abused a lot of bookmarks by making things I shouldn't have made. So I've learned from those. And actually, in that, what I've done now is I've changed my training to say, look, here are things that you can do with bookmarks. Here's an example of something elaborate you could build. But in reality, we really probably shouldn't be building all that because of all the maintenance issues and other things you've learned over time, that it really causes it's hard to maintain those kind of things. So in doing that, I've changed a bit more of how I think about bookmarks, where I use them and where I apply them, and I actually use them much more sparingly in reports than previously, than I have previously done.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think the biggest thing too is just looking at the card visual. I mean, there's a ton of scenarios here, and I think it's just the same way with, I'm trying to do X. Can I do it with this new feature? And I love samples. I love downloading sample files that people have done.
Yes, me too.
The good news is too, I think one of the links, and we'll make sure it's in the podcast, they also have a link directly to a sample to download. So I think these are a few actual PBX that you will be able to download.
You're talking from the new card visuals,
the core
core visual team is what they're building. Okay.
So, and I think that's going to be huge too, because without that, just for example, looking at the card visual here, adding all the reference labels looks awesome. Maybe there's got to be a way to automate that. And just, again, even looking at the filters and slicers, is like, I can get started myself, or I can go through that and see, how does someone do that? Because obviously a lot of these two are more than just color and design, right? It's more than just a feature. You do need to have some color ideas. You do need to have some palettes saved, and you're probably going to need some images too, because a lot of these are utilizing, again, more user interface, more design features.
And again, these tutorials, again, I'll take an example here. I'm going to actually pull one of these in here. This is one of the updates for, pull the top of the article, this one. This is an update for the reference labels inside cards. This is really powerful. Like, and the neat part about this is sometimes the features exist, but you don't get to see them. You don't get to like see designs with these new features implied. And I think one of the really rich features of this PBI Core Visuals group here is you get to see Miguel building out versions of what these core KPI card things look like. And why would you add background color? And how would it look with adding a background color on this portion versus that portion? So there's a lot more design. And one thing that I really enjoy about these documentation pieces as I'm reading through them more now, as I've been studying up for this episode, is Miguel does a really good job, or the team has done a really good job of highlighting, here's the setting inside the property panel. When you adjust these settings, these are how you adjust these properties on the various cards or things that are in the visual. So it's giving you like really good linking between this is the button you press and here's what it does. One of the features I think that's been lacking a lot in desktop, and a question I get very often from people is, I don't know what all these settings do. There's not an easy, there's not clear documentation in the tool that if I click on this button, it does this. If I click on that button, it does this. How do I learn what all the features do? And to be honest, there's too many features to learn them all, frankly.
Crazy.
I mean, to sit down and go through a card visual and turn on every single feature, that's some substantial time for you, the developer, just to learn all that stuff. So there's got to be a shortcut path here. There's got to be a condensed way of figuring out how to do this. And let's take this back to governance in your team, right? Tommy, we talk about this a lot on the channel. Once you find a style that you think is good, or if there is a style or a designer on your company team, should we really be changing the style of a lot of our cards and KPIs and visuals over and over again? It's like, I think there's also something to say for here, like, great, all these features exist, but I really think I'm becoming more and more convinced as I see this over time, we really need just company standards that we could apply to all our reports and say, start here. Let's spend all the time with one person picking the properties and styles and designs that we're going to use as the language of our company. And this is what we're going to leverage inside the reports. Because I can't tell you the number of times I've gone into reports where customers are producing reports that are going, like a company is producing reports for their customers, like an embedded share kind of thing. And there's no consistency across the reports. And there's no QA across those reports. So one report will have different size fonts, different layouts, different images, and then another report will be an entirely different experience and it'll be disjointed. So, especially if you're giving reports to external users, there is this idea of like visual language. What is that language of your company? And does everyone know how to use it? I think there's a bigger concept here that, yes, Power BI is giving us more knobs to dial in, but that causes another problem, which is, well, now that we have all these knobs, everyone's building something slightly different. So how do we evaluate, Tommy, you build a line chart. Your line chart will likely look different than mine. You're going to make different design choices around what you're going to put on there versus me, which is okay. But how do we know which one is closest to what we would say is our company standard?
How can we at least ensure with the least amount of difference that we're going to design something similar? Whether it's using the template file, we've gone through learning, there's a certain style already in place. Yeah, we may have some creative differences, but I know exactly what you're saying. And honestly, the last thing I want, and as much as I'm going to personally start using these core visuals, the last thing I would want in an app or for user experience is one report with the normal card, another report with the core visual card and all these, features and updates. The other one looks like it's from 2016 again, right? Mm-hmm. So there is something to be said too about not just your data goes through that process of, we want to vet it out, but this is something I actually use with the app audiences, Mike. I actually will create an app audience for beta or testing out a new design for a report rather than completely overriding it. And that way for people too, it's available for everyone already in that app, but it's not all of a sudden one day I'm looking at it, I know where all my buttons are. The next day we have this new pretty design, but I don't know how to use it. So I would put any, especially major updates or new visuals. I use that app Audiences, and we basically work on their design there.
That makes a lot of sense because then you could publish a version of that report and not give it to everyone. You can give it to a narrow window of people on the team, and
or,
say here's the early version of what you're looking at. Does this make sense?
Or you can give it to everyone, but it's a separate tab. It only shows up in that audience, right?
Sure.
So
Yes.
it's kind of like that hear no evil, see no evil kind of thing. And I want people to see it. I want people to go, I like this, but I don't want to take place, especially when, man, I've been burned too many times, my friend, in terms of like, I'm going to update the new filter pane to the new enhanced filter pane.
Yes.
People lost it. So just things like that, you got to be careful.
Yeah. Darian, you make another good point here in the chat. I'm going to bring up this point here as well. Darian makes a point of, from a training point of view, all of these new changes we're talking about with core visuals. And again, to be clear, the core visuals have not changed very much. We're actually introducing new visuals, but these changes are going to require existing training updates. Hey, here's a core visual documentation. Oh, and by the way, there's a new visual. Here's what you can do now in this new visual. And again, I think my point to this is, if you had to learn 5 things before for the core visual, now you can learn 15 things for the new visual because there's so many more options. It's being so much more diverse. It's giving that really refined pro tooling that we need as if we're going to really stylize and build visuals that are absolutely amazing and beautiful. And got to be honest though, I've built custom visuals. We've worked on Deneb projects before. Building visuals is hard. Users want all kinds of weird things. And you're like, what you ask for isn't even possible in the visual. So like, I know this is a challenge for Microsoft to figure out what are the right level of features and, how can you rebuild visuals in a way that is going to be extensible for everyone to use them? It just gets challenging. So I get the teams working really hard on this one. And I do want to give them mad credit and kudos for all the documentation that's coming out and how rich it's going to become, I think, in the future here. So what are your takeaways from this, Tommy? How are you going? What are you going to do like next week, tomorrow, this month to help you learn this? What's your plan of attack here?
First thing is I'm going to be ready. So am I replacing all my current visuals or my current reports, especially if they're client facing or production facing? No. But will I have this on probably a dev page for each of these or working on a different design utilizing this? Obviously, once we get more features, I can really create an entire new report with this. But I am absolutely using some of my most popular reports and creating a dev version just to get familiar, to get comfortable, to get mastered at this.
Yeah.
And then as things kind of go through, obviously the LinkedIn page right now is kind of that standard place. But I'm going to be waiting for that day for the one button migrate, one button upgrade.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's what I cannot wait for. So
let me ask you just one last question here, Tom, as we kind of wrap here. What is your preferred method for learning new things? Do you learn them throughout the week, like whenever you find them and you spend some time to learn them, or do you stay up late at night and do it on weekend, like in the nights and evenings, or do you block out some time like on a Friday or a Monday to actually learn new things? Like, what is your pattern, and what have you found anything that works well for you? Because I'm just, again, being busy doing things like, when do you find time to learn all this stuff?
The joke I've always had is whatever I find interesting at the time, I only can pray it's productive. So there are some some things that strike me that I may go on GitHub and I'm like, Crew AI, AutoGen GPT, okay. And then I have to kind of go down that rabbit hole. But honestly, I think because of our job and just the industry we're in, when people say like, well, what are the skills? I'm like, I'm just really good at learning how to learn. Like there's kind of the process of samples that I take away, find any articles I can. So samples and articles are the first thing I start with. Just getting an idea. I'm not a video person at all. Like I don't do a how-to or self-help videos. I don't really. But then it's like once I have the samples, I need to reverse engineer.
So you like having like hard copies of this. So I guess to your point earlier, PBX file examples in front of you is where you do your learning. Grab those things, look at how they set it up, look at the settings that are there. Okay. Interesting.
1,000%. What about you?
I have found for me, if I need to learn new things, if I don't dedicate a period of time throughout my calendar throughout the week, I don't do a good job of actually following through and learning the things. So what I typically do is I will block out on my calendar an hour, 2 hours, a period of time when I know that I'm not working on something else, and I'll put a chunk of time. And I typically like to explore those things earlier in the week. And then I incorporate what I've learned throughout the rest of the week as I've learned those things. So Mondays typically are slower for people. Sometimes you're getting just in the office, kind of warming up to stuff. So I try and keep my Mondays pretty open and available. And that's where I do a lot of my creative thinking. So I have found for me, it's better to schedule on my calendar some time away from like my normal workflow to dedicate some time to figuring out things. Because then when I go back into work mode, I've got all these things to do, and most of them aren't even touching Power BI desktop anymore. It's a lot of other things that I'm working on and building and architecting. So I spend a lot of time in Figma and doing designs and working with customers, explaining diagrams, architecting things. So when my time's being spent so much there, I like to come back and carve out dedicated time to explore and learn new things. Anyways, well, with that being said, you've burned through a perfectly good hour with us. We appreciate the conversation today. Tommy, thank you so much for bringing up these articles. Miguel, thank you so much for reaching out to us around all the core visuals. I think you've added a lot more confidence to us as we unpack what these mean to us and how we're going to incorporate them and or learn them as we build new visuals moving forward. All that being said, these podcasts are free. We don't charge anyone for them. We really appreciate everyone jumping in and watching the videos with us and or listening to this on YouTube, Twitter, and all the social media things. So thank you so much for joining us. Our only request to you is if you found this conversation engaging, or if the content we're sharing with you is helpful, for example, the LinkedIn posts, the core visuals, what's it called? Vision map or the vision report. So the vision board, if the vision board is something you're interested in, please go share that. Go find the posts on LinkedIn and make sure you share those right away and let everyone else know that these are things that you're interested in. And let's really drum up some community interest around these things as Microsoft will build things the community is interested in. So if we add some more effort and noise around these are the things that we like to do, Microsoft will continue developing in that direction. So with that, Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. If you have a question, idea, or topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode, head over to powerbi.tips/podcast and leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all of Power BI Tips social media channels.
Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate your ears for this hour. Have a great morning, evening, day, wherever you are. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.